Yeah, so tonight we're gonna get to hear from Madison Hungerford, who's in Bend, Oregon. I asked Madison if she could share with our midweek. First of all, Madison kind of headed up our women's event that we had virtually back in March with um, the Oregon, Montana, and Idaho churches, and she's just amazing person. I feel like I'm really grateful to get to have known her. Just I would say the last year, I feel like we've gotten to know each other a little bit more, and even the last few months, even more. Her and her husband, if you can't see her face, are young. They're a young couple in their 20s, and they have a little girl who just turned one, right? Saoirse turned one this last week, right?
Yeah, just
Uh,
Saturday.
yeah, wow, it's crazy.
Oh,
So young mom, but she is amazing. She has a YouTube channel, she has a blog post, and she's just really trying to like share God's message with as many people as possible. And she wrote a blog post that kind of just I feel like touched me and encouraged me. And I asked her to take that and give a lesson for us tonight. But she talked about just have sacred slowness, and she's been studying out an Unhurried Life is a book that she's been looking at. And so just asked her if she can kind of compile those things and talk to us about just how do we slow down and and why, and connecting to Jesus, and what does it really do. And I think with
you understand?
covid with COVID,
It
we've
can't happen.
been kind of, I don't know if forced to slow down, but forced to stop in a lot of things that we do. But maybe we're filling it back up with other things. And so, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Madison. And Madison, do you like to see everybody, or do you want what helps
Yeah,
you?
I don't know if I change it or you change it, but I just have it where I can kind of see everybody's little screen. So that
Yeah.
works for me.
Okay,
Um,
cool. All
and
right.
then I have a slideshow. So am I able to share screen? Is that good
I
for you?
will make sure to make you the host so that you can do that.
Awesome. I love a good
So,
slideshow.
yeah. Where's my
Cool.
participant?
Well, while Sarah's doing that, yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for just inviting me to come and speak and talk with you all. I love talking about this topic, and we're on a small church planting here. We're just under 20 people, and so we've been doing congregational midweeks throughout all of COVID. And so I'm a little bit rusty in my speaking right now for women's midweeks, but I feel really refreshed to get to talk with you guys and just prepare a little something for you. And like Sarah said, I wrote a blog post about this, and I realized it was just so many thoughts kind of thrown at the computer, and I love this topic. And so I've been trying to really kind of concise my thoughts into, okay, how do I present this in a way that's going to make sense to other people? So I hope that it makes sense, and I hope you guys can give me grace through my rustiness. But yeah, I'm really excited to get to talk about this with you. So let me share my screen. Um, okay, can you guys see this sacred slowness slide here? Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, so like I said, I'm going to be talking about sacred slowness, embracing an unhurried life. There is a great book called An Unhurried Life. I should have had it with me, but I have a picture of it later with the author and everything. I really recommend it. It has been incredibly inspiring to me this last year, and one of those books that I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. It's just so much good content really quickly. And so, really recommend that book, and just wanted to share kind of some of the new convictions that I've come to and discoveries about Jesus that I've learned since reading that. And I just wanted to start with this scripture. It's Luke 12:27. It says, "Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. We read the scripture a lot with people as we're studying the Bible, but what never really stood out to me is the second line of how they grow, how the lilies grow, consider them. And so I had to do a shameless plug of photos of my daughter here. But how they grow, Sarah just mentioned, my daughter just turned 1. This is on the left, the picture of the day we took her home from the hospital. And the picture on the right is at her birthday celebration. It's incredible how quickly babies grow from these tiny
Mhm.
little 7-pound like little thing to this 20-pound, she's still small, but 20-pound babe walking around my house and throwing toys all over the place and crawling and climbing. And it's amazing how much they change and the growth that happens so quickly. um, but I thought about that children don't grow because they work hard at it, because they deserve it or earn it in some way, or take so many steps a day that they grow. They grow because their bodies are nourished and their needs are met and they get enough sleep at night. That's how our kids grow. And studies have even shown that we literally grow while we sleep overnight. When we say, like, oh, she just grew overnight, we literally grow overnight while we sleep. And I just think there's so many really incredible principles about rest is how we grow. When we consider the lilies and how they grow, they don't labor or spin. God takes care of them, and they're more beautiful than Solomon and everything he did. Um, Next slide here. This is where I grew up in the Willamette Valley, and I enjoyed a very slow childhood for the most part, especially my early years. I grew up on this ranch in the Willamette Valley. I was homeschooled for a few years and spent a lot of years riding horses. And we have a couple of ponds we swam in, and just being very silly imagination kids running through the fields and peasant skirts and like playing Lord of the Rings and all sorts of goofy things. But I loved it. I enjoyed a very slow childhood. And as I got older, I went to the University of Oregon, where I met my husband. And I was really drawn to kind of the hustle and bustle of a little bit bigger of a city, um, and just the busyness and the plethora of activities and people there on campus. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed college. And then I got married. I met my husband there and became a mom. And I slowly kind of felt this longing back for a kind of slower lifestyle. In some ways, after getting pregnant, a couple weeks after moving to Bend on a church planting, I had such intense fatigue. A lot of us experience that if you've been pregnant, just insane fatigue. And so I felt God really forcing me to slow down. But I really resisted it. I hated feeling like I couldn't do everything that I normally do and felt slower. Um, and so I just was asking, like, why did I find myself resisting it so strongly? Why did this blessing of children feel like this frustrating new limitation for some reason? And why did I feel this kind of shame around my inability to keep the same busy pace that I used to have before getting pregnant? Um, and I think that it's because we in our culture and society really glorify busyness. And I'm very often terrified of being seen as lazy. To have my character be seen as lazy is awful to me. And I think that a lot of women experience this. I hope I'm not the only one who feels this way. I loved this little picture I saw. I was like, yes, that is it. That is what it feels like. I feeling this need to be constantly on the move and kind of glorifying that. I think there's this expectation for women to do it all, to have a successful career, a Pinterest worthy home, perfectly obedient children, never disrespectful, a swoon worthy marriage, a huge group of friends, total independence, a self actualized personality, and just gorgeous clothing that we've got to do it all and have it all and be it all. Um, And I just found myself thinking, and I'm wondering, you know, if you ever find yourself stuck thinking things like, I'm so exhausted, constantly feeling exhausted. I feel like if these, I hope I'm not the only one that these thoughts kind of go through my mind. I'm so exhausted. I'm totally burnt out. I'm failing. I can never catch up. I'll never be a good enough mom, wife, friend, just always feeling behind. Um, I think a lot of us, I personally feel guilty when I'm not busy. When someone asks, you know, hey, how's your day been? I always find myself being tempted to list the activities that I did or things I accomplished that day rather than the state of my heart. And the last couple of months, when people have asked me, oh, how are you doing? How's your week? How's your day? I've intentionally stopped saying things like, oh, it's good. I took Saoirse to the park and then I went and got this done and I wrote this, and I've stopped doing that and verbally ask myself, how am I doing? I have to think about it well and focus on my heart more than what I've accomplished. Um, when I don't feel that I've accomplished anything significant, when people ask me that question, I oftentimes develop this inner little bit of a panic or anxiety. Like, what can I show for my time to somebody? And you know, that's just weird. That's not God. And I think it's because of kind of this lie here that I've seen Satan really tell us. That I hear the Satan's lie is that your worth is based on what you produce. So you better keep hustling, and your work will never stop. You cannot stop working because what your worth is based on what you produce. And then I see this the truth of God in scripture, this encouragement that I was reminded of Ephesians 2. It is by grace you've been saved. This is not of your own doing. That refreshment in my heart, it is not by my own doing. You know, and the reminder of God, Christ's love, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. That's where our worth comes from, is being loved and known and created by God in his image. I loved this quote from this book, The Unhurried Life. It says, sometimes we are so focused on accomplishing things for God that we stop being concerned about doing things with God. I think every one of us wants to do great things for God. We have ambitions for God and want to honor him with our life. But do you often pause to consider how to do great things with God, partnering with the Lord? You know, lately I have been really learning to enjoy and embrace the slowness in my days. Giving myself space to take my daughter to the park and to make friends with other moms while I'm there and to talk to them about Jesus while I play with my daughter and to laugh with her and to rest. Because when I'm in a hurry, I find that I miss opportunities for connection. Whether it's the person who's checking me out at the grocery store, anything, when I'm in a hurry, I overlook opportunities for connection. I ignore people that God places in my path because I'm so focused on what needs to get done. I overlook what's most important, in my opinion, is people, relationships, God. And I want to share a story that I've been really kind of embarrassed about and humbled by. I remember recently this kind of epiphany came to me within the last couple of months, being at church, having a lot of conversations, really intentional fellowship, and noticing my daughter on my hip just whining and fussing and complaining. And rather than stopping and giving her my full attention, I felt this frustration, like, just shush, like I need to finish this conversation. I need to just, you know, can you just stop so that I can do what's important? And I'm so embarrassed to admit that because I knew this is not the kind of mom I want to be. I don't want to be a mom who's just frustrated when my literally like my baby, not even 1 year old, is trying to communicate with me. I need to stop and give her my full attention to be able to discern, what is she trying to tell me? What is she trying to communicate? And be okay with saying, I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. I need to help my daughter. I need to give her my full attention. Something's happening here, and I need to focus on this for just a minute to figure out what's wrong. If she's tired, needs to go home soon, needs to go down for a nap, wet, whatever, that I'm willing to stop and to focus on what's most important right now and connect with my daughter and love her well. I love this quote as well from the book. It says, "The one who is in a hurry delays the things of God." I love that. The one who is in a hurry delays the things of God. When I think about this, I think of the story in Genesis 29 about Jacob and Leah and Rachel. And I typed it all out in a slide and thought, I'm just going to summarize this because I was ready to read an entire chapter of Genesis. And my husband was like, you don't have time for that. So I'm going to summarize it quickly. A lot of us know this story of Jacob and Leah and Rachel. It's a great example of someone who was in a hurry. You know, Jacob was looking for a wife when he met Rachel. Not wrong. He eagerly committed to work 7 years for her, which I remember as a teen, romantically, you know, he said it felt like only a few days because of how he loved Rachel. I thought, oh, that is so sweet. I want somebody willing to work 7 years for me and it feel like just a couple of days. And then his uncle deceived him and gave him his other daughter, Leah, at his wedding. So rather than embracing the circumstance that God allowed, he immediately committed to work 7 more years to marry Rachel and push Leah to the side. I used to think that Jacob's love for Rachel was so just swoon worthy, but the more that I studied it out, God really revealed the truth of the story to me. You know, Jacob fought so hard to be with Rachel and was deceived by his uncle Laban. We know that. He was in such a hurry to get what he thought was most important, marrying Rachel, that he failed to see what God had orchestrated. You know, I see Jacob is in the line of Jesus. A lot of us know that Jesus is a descendant of Jacob. But what surprised me and what I learned is that it's not through the offspring of Rachel. It was through Leah that the line of Jesus came. And I'll show this little chart here. I remember learning this a couple of years ago and just being so blown away. Many of you may already know this, but it was just blew my mind to me that, you know, all along, God's plan was for him to be with Leah, but he was in such a hurry that he couldn't see what God was doing. God was still glorified. Jesus still came, but he missed out, I think, on something really beautiful in what God orchestrated for him. So whenever I think about that story, I think I just ask myself, you know, what circumstance am I struggling to embrace in my life? What circumstance am I struggling to embrace in my life that God has orchestrated? Is it a relationship or an illness or a work situation? You know, do I find myself wishing that the season would just be over already? Just be past it. I just want it to be in the past, that I don't have to deal with it anymore. Like, what situation do I wish was just over with already? I could just hurry on through it. And reminding myself that God is doing a good work in me in this season, in this situation of my life. I read this recently somewhere on social media. I'm paraphrasing this quote, but it was something like, in the Bible, God often meets men on mountaintops, in deserts, and in burning bushes, but he meets women in their everyday lives. And I see this, you know, walking to fetch water in John 4. Jesus meets a woman preparing their homes for guests, Mary and Martha, in the struggles of fertility and pregnancy, Mary and Leah, Hannah, and on a crowded city street, the bleeding woman. God often meets women in their everyday lives. I think in order for that to happen, I ask myself, am I creating quiet space in my daily life to hear the voice of God? Am I intentionally creating quiet space to hear the voice of God? Most women that I know are not able to go to a mountaintop every day. Unless you're actively hiking the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail or something, you're most likely not climbing mountains every single day. But I do know a lot of women who spend a lot of time doing normal things, like driving to work, dropping their kids off at school, washing dishes, tidying up their living room, folding laundry, things I find myself doing. I find myself tidying the living room 5 times a day. And I think a lot of us spend a lot of time doing that. I think that we must learn to cultivate a silent, moment to moment, continuous conversation with God as we engage in conversations and the busyness of life. We need to be in a continuous, never ending conversation with God. In order to have that, we need space for silence. We need moments of quiet while we're doing the dishes, things like that. Whatever it is that we do, in order to really hear God's voice and see what He's orchestrating, we need to remove distractions and remove the noise and stimulation. I loved this point that I learned as well, is that Jesus was never in a hurry. He calls us to a walk with the Lord. You know, we see him walking from city to city with his group of friends, walking. And when I think about that, I imagine what that must have been like for him to walk with a group of buddies from town to town, playing, laughing, resting, eating together, finding places to stay, fishing, whatever it is that they did along the way. It wasn't all this hustle, gotta get there as fast as possible. I never heard them sprinting from town to town. I hear a walk that we are called to with Jesus, with God, time with him. And I think that there's a common misconception that rest is the same thing as being lazy. It's not. Rest is not the same thing as lazy. It is actually a choice and it is a discipline. Rest is a discipline. So here's my long verse I'm going to read through Hebrews 4, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. I've highlighted the words rest through this because it says it, I think, 10 times in 11 verses. So I'm going to read this. This is, I think, the ESV version. Hebrews chapter 4, starting in verse 1, it says, "Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to us just as to them, but the message they heard did not benefit them because they were not united by faith with those who listened. For we who have believed enter that rest. And as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world. For he has somewhere spoken of the seventh day in this way, and God rested on the seventh day from all his work. And again in the passage he said, they shall not enter my rest. Since therefore it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience, again he appoints a certain day, today, saying through David so long afterwards, in the words already quoted, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later on. So then, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience." There's a lot here. This is a meaty verse. I'd really encourage you to spend time in this in your own time with God, because there's a lot here. But I love a few things that stand out. That the promise of entering his rest still stands. Rest is available to us. It is actually a command for us. And it is something in verse 11 that we have to strive to enter that rest. so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. We get to enjoy rest with God in heaven someday, but he also calls us to this rest here on earth. He even says, don't harden your hearts from the calling to rest. I think it's both a command and a gift from God. Yeah, I learned recently a fun fact that Seventh day Adventists who practice weekly Sabbath actually live longer and are less likely to develop cancer. So choosing to enter God's rest, it is a discipline that we have to create space for, and I believe God blesses it. I believe it's something we're created for in his image, that God rested, so therefore we're called to rest as well. It's an availability that we have in Jesus. It's an option that we have available to us because of Jesus. He's our Sabbath rest forever. You know, when we're in a hurry to get to the next event, we miss moments to speak into the hearts of our children, our neighbors, and our spouses. When we're in a hurry to get to the next event, we miss moments to speak into the hearts of our children, neighbors, and spouses. Have you found yourself in that same place? Like you're walking past a neighbor and you think, I should talk to them. They have a kid my age, or, she looks interesting, or she's gardening. I have that same plan. I should stop and say hello. But I gotta get going. I gotta get here. And we move past it and we miss an opportunity. I think when we are constantly stimulated and entertained, we drown out the quiet whispers of the Holy Spirit, calling us to speak to the woman next to us in line or be generous to the needy person on the street corner. It's easy to just turn up your podcast, turn up your music, and ignore the voice of God, or just be too distracted to hear it. God has commanded us to set aside time to rest. Literally, since the creation of the world, he did this. Sourdough bread. Let's talk about bread. There's this phenomenon of bread making during COVID that I think is hilarious. I joined the bandwagon. I'm guilty of it. No shame. But we haven't, oh, this should have said we haven't had time on our hand. Oh, no, we have had time on our hands for the first time in a long time. A lot of us are busier than ever, but we also have this kind of strange time available to us of being at home that we haven't really had in the past. I got into sourdough bread making because I am sensitive to gluten, and it's a lot better on your system and easier to digest and whatnot, and love sourdough. But it takes time. It takes a lot of time. I have to prepare an entire day before a meal what kind of bread I want. Even if it's just a couple of rolls, it takes time and preparation. It takes mixing the ingredients and then letting it rest. And as I let the dough rest, it grows. It grows when we let it rest. I know I'm inferring spiritual stuff into bread making, but I totally see it. Since I started sourdough bread making, I see the way that patience is so important. The first definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13 is that love is patient, requires time. I think that God really has this intended for us, an ability to rest and to be patient. And there's a sacredness in the slowness of life, and appreciating some of these kind of ancient traditions and seeing the spiritual insights through them. So, anyways, that's all I have to say about bread. But I hope that, in our need to rush through life, our need to rush through life, I think, is a very kind of first world American problem. We don't really take rests. A lot of us don't take naps. But when God created the world, he did all the hard work. It's not like God is lazy. He did all the hard work, and then he stopped to rest and to enjoy what he created, to enjoy the creation. So I hope that we can be women who value rest as much as God does. Women who value stopping to enjoy creation as much as God stopped and enjoyed creation. So a couple of things, creating ways to create practical rhythms of rest. Number one, I think, is to believe that having consistent time with the Lord every single day is the most valuable thing you can do with your time. I think a lot of us believe that, but it's something that I feel like I have to remind myself of every day, that my time with the Lord is the best way I can spend my time, the most valuable way. Think about Isaiah 55. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it bring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it." I think as women, we often have very limited time to spend with God every day. I do. I feel like sometimes I'm just scrounging for a few minutes with the Lord in the morning. If it's 1 minute or if it's an hour, when we spend time with God, we're investing in the spiritual savings account. You may not always feel the instant emotional benefit of reading a chapter in Leviticus. Leviticus is great, but you may not always feel that instant emotional gratification from it. But I really have chosen to trust that in time, God will use every one of these investments that I make to reap a beautiful harvest in my soul. He reveals profound truths to us in the right time. He sends out his word. It does not come back void. It goes out with purpose. I love that verse. So sometimes that chapter in Leviticus may not come in the moment, but maybe as you wash dishes and realize that there is a holy sacrifice in the seemingly mundane ways that you serve your family, you'll see the verses come to life. And that takes discipline. It takes discipline to do it, even when it may not have the entertainment value or initial emotional gratification that sometimes I often search for. To see my walk with God is so valuable and an investment every single day. The men and women who did great things in the Bible were prayers. They were deep in prayer. Nehemiah, Moses, Mary, Hannah, so many people who did great things with God was because they were deep in prayer with him consistently. This is a hard thing for me. I still struggle with having really consistent times with God when I see my 1-year-old running around or she gets up earlier than I thought. So really believing that no matter how much time it is, any investment that I make in my walk with God is the most valuable way I can spend my time. So the next practical way of creating some rhythms of rest. I heard this quote recently and stuck with me. Do what you can with what you have, where you are. That seemed really applicable to me in my life lately, that right now, do what I can with what I have, where I am. Doing your best for the Lord looks a little bit different for everyone. And comparing myself to, back when I was in campus, it was so much easier for me to share my faith. Or I remember used to having this mindset of, well, once I get married, then I can really serve God because I'll have a home or a place to serve people or things like that. But I think comparing myself, it's such a trap to keep me from really doing my best for God where I'm at in the situation with a limited time where I get to share my faith when I take my girl to the park. Like, that's how I get to meet moms. That is my best. And that's great. That is doing what I can with what I have, where I am, not comparing myself to different phases of my life. An example of this in my life has been I started this women's Bible study because as a young mom, I couldn't go to our Bible talks anymore. And we have them in the evenings. I couldn't go to them. And I wanted to be a part of something that I could reach out to, something, in addition to church, that I could invite moms to that I meet while I'm out and about. But I don't really have a lot of time to prepare like a whole Bible lesson or, a Bible talk or anything. And so I decided to just start a open Bible study where we just pick a book of the Bible We read through it together and we ask reflection questions on it. And this was in COVID. Like all of the coffee shops were closed here. We couldn't go anywhere, but it was winter. This was in January. And so there was this beautiful hotel lobby that I go to all the time. And I would go there and they have a little cafe, and I would just sit in their lobby and we started this Bible study. And it was what I had in the moment. That was what I could give. That was my best. And the first woman that came out to it, her name's Abby. She just got baptized last month. She was the first visitor to it and started studying and just fell in love with God and is so solid. And I just think that's so God. Like, it wasn't that I had all this time to prepare and do something amazing. It was just, hey, I want to grow in my Bible knowledge. Maybe others want to do that too. I don't have time to prepare something, but I could go somewhere and open my Bible and see who wants to do it with me. And God can do great things with that. So do what you can with what you have, where you are. And then the third thing is make time for rest and quiet. You know, I asked my husband to have one morning per week where I could go to this hotel lobby to pray, to plan my week, to study my Bible, and I rely on it. I get 3 hours once a week to myself. Sometimes that's the only time I get to myself all week, unless my daughter's sleeping at night. And I need that time. So make time for life giving activities that you love. I took up sewing recently. I learned how to make baby bonnets. I love baby bonnets, and they are a conversation starter with moms when I go to the park. People are always commenting on them, and it's a great way to start up a conversation. You know, prioritize getting that set weekly time alone with God. If at all possible, find a time. If it's an hour or 3 hours, get a little bit of time of just quiet by yourself with the Lord. It's helped me immensely. I look forward to it and I rely on it a lot. And you know, with that, there's periodically, I'm not saying no TV in the house or anything crazy, but periodically turn off your podcast, turn off the TV, the music, the noise, to simply allow room for quiet time. This is a discipline for me because I love entertainment. I love when I do the dishes, I'll put a show on or a podcast or something. I love just constant noise. I love people. I love being in groups. And so I love kind of that constant distraction. And it's a discipline for me to say, no, I'm going to turn things off. I'm just going to quietly do the dishes. I'm going to quietly feed my daughter and laugh with her and look at her and talk with her and not be distracted by anything. It's a discipline. And I love this Psalm 129 verse that says, He gives to his beloved sleep. Like, God gives sleep to us when He loves us. Sleep is a gift sometimes. I sometimes have stress dreams that I wake up in the middle of the night and sleep. As I had pretty bad postpartum anxiety. And so I would get stress dreams, and sleep felt like a gift from God sometimes, to sleep through the whole night, or, you know, just with a newborn in general. So, you know, rest. God really does. We see here, God values sleep and rest. The fourth thing here is to set righteous boundaries. You know, have an early bedtime. This is hard for me. My daughter's finally asleep and I just want to do something for myself. It's hard for me to go, I have to think about tomorrow morning getting up early, so I need to go to bed early. That's a righteous boundary for myself. Allow yourself time in between scheduled appointments and activities. Give yourself a little cushion, not back to back constantly. I really needed to do that. When I was in college and I had class back to back to back and then meetings back to back, I could do that, but I can't do that anymore. I need time to reset and give my heart back to God in between things. And the last thing, I've heard this advice that I really want to implement as I have prayerfully more children in the future, is to limit my family's extracurricular activities like sports and clubs and teams. They're all great things, but I think oftentimes that need to do it all. My kids are in every sport, every activity, and succeeding and all these things that it can really be a thief of joy. It can really run us ragged when we're constantly in a rush to get to the next place. You know, Psalm 16, a lot of us probably know this verse, says, Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I love that. I love that so much. There's a way to set righteous boundaries. And then lastly, when you're tempted to just return to the hustling and that scarcity mindset, just to remember to consider the lilies, how they grow. God is calling us to obediently enter his rest, that he is the one who nourishes us and takes care of us and helps us to grow. So this is the book, Unhurried Life. It's by Alan Fadling. And I'm still working through it. I'm not finished with it because there's so much good stuff in there. But this is what I had to share. So thank you guys so much for letting me speak. I love just talking about this and could talk about this much longer. So I will end it here. But yeah, thank you guys so much.